opiate abuse, particularly heroin, which is the growth area in my state of Ohio and around the country. We now have the alarming statistic that in Ohio it's the #1 cause of death, greater than auto accidents, which is typically the case. I was able to speak at the rally on addiction that occurred on Sunday evening here, and then spent the week with some of the individuals who came in from Ohio. And I do believe that this is an epidemic level at this point, particularly in certain parts of our state. And by the way, the addiction rates in our rural communities are higher than in our urban or suburban communities now, according to the latest statistics that we have. And I focus more on the demand side and the treatment and recovery side, but law enforcement plays a critical role, and we need your help in Ohio. We do have some HIDA programs that are working well, and I appreciate your commitment to that today. Switching gears for a second, Secretary Johnson, just over a week ago, you stated the threat of foreign terrorist fighters requires the comprehensive efforts of all of our partners. Agencies, allied nations will continue to adapt to this evolving threat and take the necessary action to protect the American public. I would ask this morning, Director Rasmussen, if you could give us some information on these foreign fighters. And specifically, my concern is, of course, these visa waiver countries. Can you tell us how many foreign fighters from visa waiver program countries have traveled to Syria to date?
I'd have to get back to you with the breakdown by the visa waiver countries as we understand it, Senator, but in aggregate, we assess that if you go back to the period when the conflict began, well over 3 years now, and look in aggregate, the population of individuals who we assess have traveled to the conflict zone is upwards of 28,000 right now. Now, that is an aggregate, so it does not mean that today, as we speak, there is a pool or a population inside Iraq and Syria that captures and covers 3 years of activity. It also captures and covers activity in both directions. Individuals who've died on the battlefield, individuals who've come and gone, individuals who've left and gone to other onward third locations. From the West, and that would largely capture the visa waiver countries that you're talking about, Senator, we assess that population, that aggregate total is somewhere in excess of 5,000, with the number of U.S. persons, as the Director indicated, being approximately 250. So that's the broad breakdown of the numbers as we have them. The greatest supplier countries come from the immediate frontline states in the region, as you would imagine, because travel is so easy. But then as you get into the next outer ring, which of course would include Southern and Western Europe, of course the population numbers are significant there as well.
Yeah. That's a shocking number, 5,000. And just so people understand what we're talking about here, these are countries that have a visa waiver program with the United States where they can come to the United States without going through the normal process to get a non-immigrant visa. These are countries that are sending foreign fighters into Syria. The concern is they would then go back to their country of origin and then be able to come to the United States under a visa waiver. And 5,000 is obviously a huge number and a huge concern. If you wouldn't mind, what I'd like to do is ask you to get back to me on a more specific number from the visa waiver countries. And specifically, I have a concern about the lack of information sharing. And you know, we have programs with some of these countries where we try to share information, but the passenger name recognition data, as I understand it, leaves us vulnerable to some of these countries sending us some of these foreign fighters. Can you tell us a little about that, or anybody else in the panel, how that program is working and what else can be done to get better data on these people?
Senator, let me start. I agree with you about the concern of foreign fighters coming from countries for which we did not require a visa, which is why last year we required additional information data fields in the ESTA database, those who want to come here. And then in August of this year, we identified a number of security enhancements that we could obtain from countries in the program so that we have a much better idea of who is coming here from those countries. They include, for example, the requirement that these countries make better use of API and PNR data, that they use the Interpol database for stolen passports on a more regular basis, that we increase the use of federal air marshals on flights coming from these countries. There are a whole series of security enhancements that we identified that we could obtain and we are obtaining from these countries for exactly this reason.
And what more do you need? What more can we help you with? Is there anything legislatively we can do, or codification of any of that, or other ways to ensure we don't have these foreign fighters slipping into this country?
Well, HSPD 6, which is a presidential directive, gives us a lot of authority in this area. And if countries want to be in this program, they should agree to these security enhancements. So that has been the mechanism for our seeking greater assurances on that. But this is a concern of mine, and I'm always asking my staff that exact question. Is there any legislative authority that we could use?
Well, let us know. And on the passenger name recognition data, my understanding is there's some concerns there. Is there more we can do to tighten that up as well? And maybe we can get back to us with a specific answer on that issue. On the Syrian refugees in general, as you know, Secretary Johnson, I've spent some time focusing on this issue of special immigrant visas for interpreters who served with our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've had a real hard time being able to go through the security clearance for these interpreters who had already gone through a clearance process. Mm-hmm. And so I got to tell you, I'm very skeptical of what I hear today about 10,000 Syrians coming into this country and having some sort of an expedited process to screen them, having gone through the experience of these interpreters. So I guess I would ask you today, and Director Comey also, you've expressed concerns about this as well, I've noted in the public media. How are we going to deal with this? 1,600 Syrians by the end of fiscal year 2015 are going to be admitted. Don't you think that also creates a threat to the homeland? And if you do think that, from your, again, the comments that I've seen in the public media, you have a concern about that, what are we going to do about it?
Well, yes, Senator. I mean, there is risk associated with bringing anybody in from the outside, but especially from a conflict zone like that. From the intelligence community's perspective, as I said, I think we've developed an effective way to touch all of our databases and resources to figure out what we know about individuals. Right? And so that's my piece of it. I don't think that's a cumbersome process. My concern there is that there are certain gaps that I don't want to talk about publicly in the data available to us. But I can't speak to the rest of the processing that may be part of what you're talking about.
Well, I think there's a significant gap because our intelligence in Syria is so bad, right? I mean, we really don't have the information that we need to be able to process these folks. And I think we need to figure this out quickly, given the fact we've made this commitment. But I don't know, Director Rasmussen, do you have more to add to that?
I mean, you've certainly highlighted that as a matter of comparison, the intelligence picture we have of this particular conflict zone is not as rich as we would like it to be. So that would give us, obviously, when you screen and vet, you screen and vet against available intelligence holdings. The more you have, the more likely you are to be able to catch derogatory information that would cause you to review a potential case more closely. So I think the director is absolutely right. We've got a much more streamlined and effective system to make sure that all of our intelligence holdings are brought to bear as these decisions are made, but you can only review against what you have, and again, we are actually building that fact into the way our analysts look at the picture as well, so that at least we can identify where more questions need to be asked, even if intelligence isn't available.
Well, my time has expired. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman, but I think this is a huge issue. And before making these commitments, I hope that there were some dialogue with certainly you three gentlemen in your organizations, and I hope that we can come up with a screening process that's better than the one we've had on these interpreters I talked about, and particularly with even less intelligence, as you say, from the ground. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.